Hi, folks. About 3 months ago, Carrie and mine asked me to do a video on how someone would know if they've chosen a good therapist. And I have taken 3 months to answer that because for the longest time, up until probably about 2 minutes ago, I had no idea how to answer that question. So, Carrie and mine, I wasn't blowing you off. I'm sorry if it appeared that way. I realized that there's five. I'm looking at notes here, so excuse me for making it obvious that I'm looking at notes here, but I've determined five specific things that I want to talk about when it comes to when a therapist is being therapeutic. So, one has to do with just that term therapeutic. If a therapist is being therapeutic, it doesn't always mean that they're making you feel good. Well, first of all, they can't make you feel anything. Either you feel good or you don't, based on a lot of stuff that's going on in your thoughts and in your mind and your life. But therapy does not always mean feel good. And sometimes therapy means feeling really uncomfortable. So the first one is safety versus comfortable. My clients know that my number one concern is that they feel safe, that they know that they're going to leave here intact physically and emotionally for the most part. For the most part, meaning whatever intact means emotionally. They're not going to leave here so dysregulated that they walk out into the parking lot feeling like they're naked and bleeding, is the phrase I use. So they have to feel safe. You have to feel safe in your therapy. You have to know that your therapist's number one concern is that you feel safe, that they want to help you, that they're going to help you, that they can help you, that they're not out to cause more harm. And in doing that, I actually just wrote a blog about that recently. Sometimes therapy and healing feels really, really uncomfortable. Sometimes it hurts. And so while you're safe and you know you're safe, you feel very uncomfortable. And it's often the case that once clients start doing the really, at least the deeper work in here, they take some time off from sessions. They call in, again, I'm not feeling well. I can't make it today. I've decided not to come. And I know that generally speaking, that happens when they're feeling really uncomfortable about the stuff that we're talking about. And so you have to feel safe in your therapy because if you don't feel safe, you're not going to allow yourself to do the uncomfortable stuff. So I would say, first off, if you're not feeling safe with your therapist in your therapy, um, say that out loud to your therapist. Let your therapist know this. Uh, I don't feel like I can go there because I'm not sure. I just don't feel safe. And I don't know where that conversation will go, but certainly your therapist would guide you in exploring that further, processing that, and finding out what you need that you don't feel like you're getting yet. The second is want versus need, what you need. Now, there's a lot of times when my clients tell me what they need and they actually are telling me what they want. And I know that because if they say something that they need that is not something that's going to help them heal, but rather is going to keep them stuck in this unhealthy emotional state, then that's what they want because it feels familiar sometimes, but it's not necessarily what they need. So, for example, it's common in therapy that a client will start to experience transference with their therapist, which means that very briefly that their therapist is reminding them of someone in their life. Now, if a client is constantly or frequently or even at all, if a client is behaving in ways that a parent would say, knock it off, they might want their therapist to discipline them in that way. They might want their therapist to say, stop it, don't do that. But that's not what they need. Um, they don't need somebody saying in that moment in their therapy, you should and you shouldn't, if it isn't about their immediate safety. So therapists shouldn't be given advice for the most part unless it has to do with someone's safety. If someone is in, a very unsafe situation or potentially unsafe situation, as a therapist, I should help them identify that this is not safe and then identify what's the next safest step. And sometimes that might look like advice. Sometimes that might be straight up advice because in that moment it has to do with safety. But if it's not about safety, then I shouldn't be telling people what they should do, um, because they need to decide for themselves what's right for them. And also, I shouldn't fall into a trap of giving them or guiding the therapy in a way that the clients want necessarily. So sometimes clients express their needs based on actual needs. Sometimes they express their needs based on wants. And so I think a good therapist wouldn't always give a client what they want in therapy if what they want is actually an unhealthy thing. So sorry about that. I'm going to turn this down here. I don't know. Um, that was off. So the next one is guidance versus self determination, goes into what I just said, that a good therapist should offer some guidance. Um, Even if it's so covert that it's not even seen as guidance. There's a type of therapy, Rogerian therapy, that is really, really strict about not guiding, not being suggestive as a therapist, not guiding the client to any particular direction. But even by doing that, just reflecting what the client says, and but even in doing that, we're guiding our clients. We're guiding them towards not getting guidance from us. So we're guiding them towards coming up with their own ideas, their own thoughts, and figuring out for themselves what they need just by the way that we reflect. And so guidance can look very different depending on the client and the therapist, and even the mood of the client and the therapist. But always we need to keep in mind the client's self-determination, at least in this culture. That if you come to me for therapy, I might be sitting here thinking, oh my gosh, this person, we really need to work on this in therapy. And you might not need that at all. Um, and you absolutely get to decide what you need in your therapy. So if, there's this thought that we're always going to talk about your childhood, we're always going to talk about your relationship with your parents, and we're always going to bring up old trauma. And that happens a lot. What I tell my clients is, you've just told me that this happened in your life. Sometimes it makes sense to work on that in therapy, and sometimes it doesn't make sense. So, to know if it makes sense, is that event still affecting your life in unhealthy ways today? Are there things that you're avoiding? Are there relationships that you're struggling with? Are you having a hard time keeping your job? Is there some stuff that's not taken care of yet from that past event now in your life presently? And if they say yes, absolutely, well, then it makes sense to go through and work through that stuff. If they say, you know what, Nikki, it happened, it sucked that it happened, it better not ever happen again. And sometimes I think about it, but it doesn't really affect my life right now. Then why would we bring it up? That's just nonsensical to bring up something that you've already work through in a very healthy way. So, um, guidance. I'm I say, like, I'm here to navigate, but I'm not here to drive for you. You have to do the driving. All I'm doing is navigating. And you can say, I mean, how many times does your GPS say turn left here? And I'm like, no, I don't want to. And you're like, no, I don't want to turn left here because this way is better. And so that's the same in therapy. A good therapist will give you guidance like a GPS. Um, will recommend that you might turn around and go the other way if you've gone a different way, but it's not. Therapist isn't going to drive the car for you. That's something for you to do. That goes into the next point of the therapist as an expert versus the therapist as a human. I don't even know if it has to be a versus. It can be human experts. But what I meant by that when I thought of that is I went to school for this. Um, and I know I went to a lot of school for this. And I continued my learning, and I'm still continuing my learning. I have like 4 books in the works right now that I'm reading. I have workshops that I'm signed up for. I'm constantly trying to become more of an expert in what I do. And at the same time, I will never be an expert in my client. I might be an expert in how to treat trauma, how to treat grief, how to help someone in that. I might be an expert in the type of therapy that I do, but I'm not an expert in the person sitting across from me. That person is. And so if they want something or they need something and I think they need something else, one, then I'm not listening to them, like I've already said. The other thing is, um, I'm going to make mistakes. I'm gonna screw up as a therapist, even though I hope I don't, but I know I will. And there was a time when talking about my own personal experiences, which I realize I'm kind of stammering a little bit now because it feels vulnerable to say it, but in an effort to just reduce the stigma that is around being in therapy, I think it's important that I'm at least very clear that I've been in therapy and it's been very helpful for me. But one of the most therapeutic moments I had in therapy was when I told my therapist that something that she did upset me and I didn't like it and I didn't feel heard. And her response was so awesome. It really was so awesome. And it was exactly what I needed. And I won't say exactly what she said, but basically, she communicated to me that she heard what I just said and that she didn't need to hold her ground, that she was right in that moment. And she apologized. And that was so powerful for me to be able to hear my therapist acknowledge what I said, hear what I said, acknowledge it, and acknowledge that I had a valid point and that she wanted to make that right by me. That was huge. And so, did I view her as less of an expert? Absolutely not. She's an amazing person. She's an amazing therapist. She's good at what she does. Who made a mistake? And I wouldn't, without that mistake that she made and the way she carried herself following that mistake when I talked to her about it, if not for that, I wouldn't have had that therapeutic moment. And so I think it's really important, and this is where therapists vary a lot, and a lot of clients vary as far as how much they want their therapist to be like this, but it's important for me, kind of like what I'm doing now, talking about my own therapy, it's important for me to let my clients know that I'm a real person here. And there's some things I do damn good. I'm so good at some things, and there's some things where I absolutely screw up. And I won't ever pretend or promise that I'm not going to screw up. I do promise that if, and not if, when I screw up, I will do my best to acknowledge it and own it. And so when people say, "Well, you're the expert. You should blah blah blah," There's stuff that I should know as an expert. There's stuff I absolutely don't know because I'm not an expert in you. And there's times when I'm going to really screw up because I'm a human being, even though I try hard not to, because I don't want my clients to be hurting because of my mistakes. So I think it's important for a good therapist to recognize that and make that clear that they're not perfect. And anybody that holds them to perfection, whether it's their client or themselves, um, needs a reality check on that one. Another one is judging versus evaluating, and that kind of goes off what I just said. It's amazing how these things just build off of each other. Judging a person versus evaluating behaviors. I don't know of any therapists. I'm not saying they don't exist. I'm saying I haven't met them yet. I haven't talked to them yet. Or if I have talked to them, I don't know this about them. I don't know of any therapists that judge their clients as people. I don't know of any therapists that say that person is a bad person. That person is not a good person. Therapists should, however, judge behaviors that the client is doing as healthy, not healthy, helpful, unhelpful, or even right or wrong sometimes. Sometimes we have to label behaviors for our clients. And so if I say to you, what you are doing is abusive, I'm not saying you're a piece of crap. I'm saying you are behaving in abusive ways and that needs to stop. I'm not saying I think you're a bad person. I, I don't want to work with you again. I can't even imagine why you would do something like that. No, I truly, truly believe that everything that we do is our very, very best attempt to fill a need that we have with what we have and what we know in that moment. Second later, that what we have and what we know might change dramatically, and we might go back and say, if I could do that last 5 seconds over again, I would, and I would do it differently. But I also think it's important for me to evaluate behaviors and say that behavior that you're doing is not useful. That behavior that you're doing is not going to bring you closer to your goals that you've stated you want for yourself. Or that behavior that you're doing is not okay. And on the flip side, when someone says, does something that is helpful, to reinforce that as well and help them see how that behavior will actually get them closer to their therapy goals. So I think I've covered I plan to cover on that. I'm not sure if it brings a whole lot of clarity as far as what a good therapist is, because really you have to decide for yourself if your therapist is a good fit for you. I will say this, there are a lot of variables that go into whether or not a therapist and a client connect therapeutically. And those variables could be anywhere from the personality of the therapist and the personality of the client, what the client needs, and what the therapist specializes in or is good at treating. It could be the mood in that moment of the therapist and the client. I wish I could say that the therapist mood doesn't come into the therapy. But again, as I said, we're human. And so our humanness does come out, and that could affect the therapeutic relationship. It could be whether or not the therapist or the client got their needs met in terms of did they eat a healthy meal before they showed up? Are they sleep deprived? So all of those things can help determine or do contribute to determining if a client and a therapist are a good fit or a good match. So I will say this, if you are in therapy, if you're seeking therapy and you've had a bad experience with a therapist, please do yourself a favor and know that there could be any number of variables that led to that, and keep looking. Someone once told me, and I use this metaphor a lot, that imagining like you just found a really good pair of shoes, and they don't fit. And there's nothing wrong with the shoe. It's a great shoe, and there's nothing wrong with your foot. Your foot's just fine. It's just the shoe doesn't fit the foot, and so you have to keep on searching for a better fit. And I encourage you to do that because I think it's so unfortunate when people tell me I'll never go to therapy again. That was horrible, um, because truly it could just be that it wasn't a good fit. And I know I have people that I know in my life that have tried several therapists, upwards of like 10, before they found the one. And it was like, oh my gosh, thank God, after 10 failed attempts at therapy because it wasn't a good fit, I found the one that was, and I'm doing it and feeling so much better now. So I would say that's really important, that if you've had a bad experience with a therapist, that you absolutely deserve the opportunity to find one that is therapeutic for you based on your particular needs. I hope this has been helpful, and if you have any other ideas for any other videos you'd like to see, let me know, and I'll also link Caring Minds channel in this thread. And thank you, Caring Mind, for giving me the idea for this video and for challenging me to come up with an answer for you. Take care.